and welcome to People Are Talking.
A little later in the program, our bargain hunter, Sally Sokolich, will be with us, bringing us once again great bargains on spring and summer fashions that didn't make it to the regular stores they were supposed to go to in time. So she's got great it's all in fashion right now.
High fashion things.
High fashion designs.
At low cost.
At low prices from Sally Sokolich later.
Well, we have an incredible story for you this morning. It's the real-life story of the love between a mother and son. Now, for those of you who have seen the film Mask, you know that Cher turns in a stunning performance as the mother who's a flamboyant California biker with an affinity for drugs, who bravely raises her little son, Rocky, a little boy with a rare disease that eventually distorts his face into a cruel mask of deformity. But she gives him no pity, no compensation. She raises him to feel special, gifted, better than most. And for all intents and purposes, at the age of 17, when he died, he felt just that way about himself. Well, if you haven't seen the film, you're going to have a very special moment this morning as we give you the real-life story, because our guest is none other than Rocky's real mom, who's with us this morning to talk about the realities of loving, life, death, and the strength of the human spirit. Would you welcome Rusty Mason?
Good morning, and thank you for coming to visit us.
Thank you for having me.
Your son, Rocky, had a rare disorder called cranial diospheal dysplasia. It's very close to that. It was a rare disorder. When he was born, was there any reason to believe he was anything but healthy?
No. No, he looked fine when he was born. You have some pictures of him.
Yeah, there he is.
3 months, yeah.
How much did he weigh at birth?
7 pounds, 4 ounces.
And did you have any problems with the pregnancy at all?
No.
So for all intents and purposes, at 3 months, you had this beautiful, healthy baby boy and everything was going fine.
Right.
When did it start to change?
You know, that's really hard to tell. He started getting a lot of ear infections and sinus infections and sore throats. So when he was 2.5, we had his tonsils out, and the x-rays picked up an abnormality in the bone. So they took x-rays of his entire body, and they found that there was something wrong. They weren't sure what, and they thought he had something else at first, and they sent him out to UCLA. And after about a year of testing back and forth, you know, they realized that he had this rare bone disease, cranial diophysal dysplasia.
But what did you do in this time? I mean, did they give you any information about what was going on, or they just said, we're going to keep Rocky?
No, they didn't keep him for a year. It was back and forth 3 or 4 times a week to UCLA Medical Center, and then they had him in the hospital for about 3 weeks, and at the end of that time, they made a determination. And what they said was it was a very rare disease. There were only 7 in medical history. It was a recessive genetic disorder, and that the only cases they'd known of died before they were 6 years of age. They were blind, deaf, or were constantly ill, non-ambulatory, and...
Well, that's kind of a heavy prognosis, isn't it?
Right, right.
Is it bottom line a calcium buildup?
Yeah. I guess there's an enzyme lacking that causes calcium and phosphorus to deposit normally on the bones, and so the calcium builds up on all the large bones of the body, and the skull being the largest and densest, it showed the most in the skull.
But now, we know from the movie, if it is true, that you're a pretty feisty woman, and that you were not going to take that diagnosis lying down.
Well, I have always been into spiritual healing, although I was on some level aware that since there was a deficiency in his chemical makeup, we probably couldn't do anything about the overall condition, although we tried, that all of the diagnosis didn't have to be so.
Every time you took Rocky to the doctor, what was their diagnosis as far as how long he would live?
Oh, every time we went in during a rapid growth period, they say he wouldn't live out the year, you know, and this went on, you know, almost every year.
Cora, you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to know that when you first was told that your son had this disease, how did you feel? Did you feel that you were being punished for something, or how did you take it? What was your first reaction?
Well, I think my first reaction was shock, and then I went into action. No, I don't think I felt punished. I did feel that there was a special reason for Rocky, and I also felt that At least I didn't believe that he was going to die that young, regardless of what had happened to the others, and I didn't believe that it was necessary for him to be sick or blind or deaf. And basically what they told me was that he didn't have enough vision to read, and he read because he didn't believe in being blind.
Pretty much during your pregnancy and after you had Rocky, could you tell us what your lifestyle was?
My life during my pregnancy and right after I had him was pretty mellow. I have a tendency towards miscarriage, so early in my pregnancy, you know, I stayed pretty quiet, pretty still. And then I did a lot of swimming and that kind of thing, and a pretty normal pregnancy.
Were you taking drugs at all during your pregnancy?
No, the year before I got pregnant with Rocky, I had a really bad case of epidemic infectious hepatitis. And at that time, they told me I wouldn't live, and then they told me I'd be bedridden for a year. Well, I was well in about 6 weeks, but I was aware that that condition could change if I didn't take care of my body, so I took real good care of myself, and I didn't use drugs. And when I got pregnant, I didn't hardly even smoke or use coffee either. And I didn't use drugs again until after I stopped nursing Rocky.
So you never felt at any moment that, gee, I wonder if this is a result of the fact that I've been taking drugs?
Well, no, also the fact that the way they explained this to me, that it wouldn't matter whether I'd taken anything or not, this condition was going to happen anyway.
At what point did you decide, I'm not going to raise my son to have any self-pity? He's going to be a fighter. He's going to go out there and get what we all want.
No point. I don't believe in self-pity. It's a detrimental emotion. Self-pity or pity, for that matter.
Where did you learn that?
I've just always known it. Some things you just know. You don't have to learn them.
So as he was growing up a little, you just treated him like a regular little boy?
He was a regular little boy.
Yes, he was. But
how else could I treat him?
But for the rest of the world that would look at him and say he was different, how did you prepare him for that?
He was a regular little boy, and he projected himself as a regular little boy with a good sense of humor, and people took him that way.
Everybody took him that way? Nobody stared?
Basically. Oh, people stared all the time, you know. Early in his life, Rocky learned to turn things into a joke, you know. Once you get people laughing, things change.
So you taught him basically how to turn all of that around?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people even Rocky himself stared at people who were different. You know, so he understood that. You know, I took him to Las Vegas when he was 10, and I sat him in the lobby of the Hacienda Hotel, and I went to gamble, you know, and I came back, and just as I walked in the room, there was an achondroplegic dwarf coming through the door, and Rocky was staring, and he was giggling, and I said, what's going on, Rocky? And he said, look at that lady. And I said, yeah, look at that lady. I said, now do you understand why people look at you? And he said, yeah. And the next time I came back, he had struck up a conversation with the woman, you know. So, I mean, life presented him with lots of explanations for why things were the way they were and how to react to them. Or to not react to them, basically.
When Rocky was old enough to go to school, what did most educators suggest his schooling should be?
Well, originally they put him into... Well, I lied about his age to get him into school because they told me he wouldn't live to be 6, and he wanted to go to school when he was 4 1/2. So I lied about his age and I put him in school. Well, obviously he was at least 6 months younger than the other kids, and he was more mature than they were. And so eventually they wanted me to furnish papers, you know. They wish I had kept telling them, I'll bring in, you know. So finally they, you know, I had to tell the truth about it, and they said, well, he can't stay in school. He can't come back until next year, but there's a special school that he can go to. So I let them put him in the special school, and he started in kindergarten, and 3 days later they started him on first grade level work. They told me they were going to have him in an accelerated program. Well, they never began the accelerated program, so for a couple of years he was doing first grade level work and, you know, learning the things that they teach handicapped people. And I didn't think he was going to be handicapped, and it wasn't necessary. So when I tried to get him into public school, they tried to tell me he was retarded. Well, of course, he wasn't educated as well as most 7-year-olds, so, you know, it would look like that. So I asked them to test him on reasoning and logic. Well, nobody wanted to test him. And inadvertently, I'd heard through the school system that one of the reasons was they were afraid of his appearance, you know, how that it wouldn't work out well, you know, and he wasn't retarded at all. So I finally went in and made a big scene, and they tested him, and he tested out 2 years older than his age level, and so they started him in the first grade, and he was behind about 1.5 years until he was in the 5th or 6th grade, and he decided he wanted to get ahead, and so he talked to me about it. I said, well, you know, go for it, Rocky. So he cornered the superintendent of schools one time when they were coming through the schools on a tour, and talked to him, and a week later they were tutoring him and getting him ready to go into junior high with his friends who were his age and, you know, in a higher grade.
And
So
he went
did
on
real
to,
well.
he went on to graduate as an honor student from high school.
Yeah.
We're going to
From
continue
junior high school.
after this. Stay tuned. Yeah. Rocky, are you happy with the movie?
Yeah, pretty much so, except they cut out 2 really important scenes. I'm not happy with the music. But I've said that so often now.
Well, a lot of us may not be aware of that. The music...
Should have been Bruce Springsteen's music. And they got Bob Seger cheaper, so they used him.
And that was just basic. It was a matter of finances.
Basically, it had to do with finances and videotape rights. I'm not into the political side of this thing. That's politics, you know.
But
As far
Rocky
as-
enjoyed Bruce Springsteen?
Yeah.
And Bob Seger...
He didn't, I don't think he even knew who Bob Seger was. I certainly didn't. Or at least if I did, I didn't know who the artist was that did Cat Me Undo. I'm sure I'd heard Cat Me Undo, you know. It was just not appropriate for the movie. Originally, it began with Badlands and ended with Promised Land. They used a couple of other cuts in the middle, you know, at various emotional scenes that Rocky went through during the movie. They used some of Springsteen's things, you know. One of them, I think, was growing up. Just things that he could relate to, you know, which made a lot more sense than what they actually did. And as far as the scenes, you know, one of them was kind of a playful scene with Rocky and I dancing and singing, and the other one was a biker funeral.
I missed it. I turned to him when we saw the film and I said, why didn't they do a biker's funeral? I'm sure that they would have done
They
it.
had a biker's funeral. In the funeral, Red dies, and it's Red's funeral. He's the president of the club. And they show them shooting guns and partying, you know, and lowering the bike into the grave, and people throwing things into the grave, ripping stuff off their cut-offs and throwing them into the grave, and Rocky's sitting off by himself, you know, and kind of just thinking. And Cher goes over and she said, do you want to throw something into the grave, Rocky? And he looks back and he says, no. He said, Red's not in there. He's here now. He's with us. He's free. You know, he's everywhere. And I think they do have that scene in the book that was later based on the screenplay. I know it was in the screenplay itself.
But I missed a biker's funeral for Rocky.
Well, there was no real... There was a party. There was, you know, they didn't put that in. They didn't even shoot that scene. Yeah, there was a 3-day party in real life. People came and went and we partied, you know, because Rocky liked to party. So we spent a few days partying. No, they didn't do that. I don't know why they didn't do it, you know.
Another thing, and that's why you expected a party or a biker's funeral. In the film, there was such closeness between the older men in the bikers club and Rocky. And it seemed like he had lots of fathers, lots of men that loved him a lot and took care of him.
Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was true.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, lots of... Well, you know, bikers are like... I know you find it hard to believe, like a big family, you know. We're kind of like gypsies and people like that, you know. And really close family ties, even though none of us are actually related, you know. And everybody's considered a brother or a sister.
Roberta.
Yes, I wanted to ask you how you felt about Cher playing you in the movie, and how you feel about her maybe getting the Academy Award for this movie.
She should get an Academy Award. She was great. You know, my father just recently saw the movie, and he said that, well, he'd look at the screen and he could just see me up there, you know. She did a great job. Great.
Did you communicate with her so that she got a real feeling for the part? Did you two sit and talk about real-life situations?
We talked 2 or 3 times for a few hours, and yeah, we talked about ourselves and our lives and our beliefs and things like that. And Cher and I, we probably could be very good friends if we both weren't so busy. We don't have too much time together anymore. But yeah, I think that we're pretty much alike in a lot of ways.
There's one scene in the movie where Cher, playing you, is in the kitchen and she's trying to write a letter to Rocky, who's gone away to camp. It's really tough for you to live without Rocky, and he's gone away for a couple of months. She can't write the letter. And Sam Elliott, who plays Gar, comes in and helps her. Before we see the scene, Is that what happened?
Well, that's great because I'm a lousy letter writer, and I do that with every letter I try to write. I tear up reams of paper trying to write letters, and then I finally shine it on and make a phone call. So, yeah, that's pretty basically so. That's exactly the way I would probably have done it.
Let's take a look at a scene from Mask.
Gar, I can't, write a letter to Ricky, and I miss him.
He needs sleep, Russ.
No.
Come on.
You help me. You help me write the letter, please. Dear Rocky, I miss you. And you're away at camp. You're not in your room. And I miss you. And I'm sorry that I was bad. And oh, Screech is here, and Gar is here, and I love you. Love Mom. Love Mom. With a little kiss. Have you got that, Gar?
I got it all.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, actually, in that scene, I was probably coming off a speed run also, and had been away for days.
So you were still taking drugs at that time?
Oh, yeah.
In this story.
But before Rocky went to camp, he was really always trying to get you off.
No, he wasn't always trying to get me off, but they did play that up a little bit.
Did he worry at all about your drug taking?
Well, yeah, after I went to the hospital and got busted, sure, he worried about it.
What happened when you went to the hospital?
I'd done too much of a drug, and the paramedics came and took me to the hospital. They took me to the jail ward. And, of course, Rocky was concerned about that particular drug, because usually I was in pretty good control of myself, you know, and I didn't do things that would get me busted at that time, you know. It was just... So he was worried about, you know, my doing that drug and the same thing happening. So we basically agreed that it wasn't a good idea for me to do that drug, because I don't like jail anyway.
What drug was it?
PCP.
When you went to pick him up, in the movie anyhow, when Cher went to pick up Rocky at camp, she said, "I'm clean." Did you go pick him up in camp in real life, and were you clean at the time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't spend all my time doing drugs. I spent lots of time clean. It's just that
the movie portrayed it pretty much as that you were on drugs.
well, they
most of
took
the
that,
time.
you know, a specific period of time and made it sound like, you know, they take poetic license. I didn't do drugs day in and day out for 99 years, you know. It didn't work that way at all. I mean, we'd go all summer and party and do drugs, you know, a lot. And then things had kind of settled down and we wouldn't do drugs, you know. So it was kind of on again, off again. It wasn't like day in and day out doing
Are you
drugs.
clean
Of course,
today?
I partied. Yeah, I've been clean. The 19th will be a year I've been clean and sober.
We got a couple of messages for you. Be right back.
Free tickets. Our number is 478-KPIX. That's 478-KPIX.
Come celebrate with the Richmond Rescue Mission 20th Anniversary Banquet, May 17th, 6:45 p.m., Richmond, California. Richmond Civic Auditorium, 27th and McDonald Avenue, Richmond. Reverend William Jenkins, Executive Director, Southside Mission, Peoria, Illinois, will be the guest speaker. Linda Jackson is a featured soloist. During the past 20 years, the Richmond Rescue Mission has grown from a 16-bed facility in 1965 to providing daily overnight accommodations for 188 people in 1985. For reservations, call 233-5333.
She is the real-life mom of Rocky. Her story is, of course, the story of Mask, starring Cher, which is now in all the movie theaters around. A great film. Nancy, you had a question.
First of all, I saw the movie, and I really liked it a lot. How much were you consulted during the course of the writing and the filming? And were there parts that, if you hadn't liked it, you could have asked to have it deleted?
I worked with the writer a lot. Anna and I became really good friends. During the movie, no, I wasn't consulted very much, and if I didn't like something, that was too bad, because I'd already signed my rights away to, you know, having anything to say about the movie.
Did you meet Sam Elliott?
Yes, I did.
Wow.
I met Sam Elliott when I went to the first screening at Universal Studios, and I hugged him. Yeah, that was when I went to the first screening that they showed me. That it was the third screening I'd seen, and that was the first one I'd seen with the Bob Seger music. And I said, "Who the hell is Bob Seger?" And somebody said I wouldn't say that to the press, and I said, "Well, I'm glad you wouldn't."
Because?
I didn't say any. You know, Rocky didn't know who Bob Seger was.
We know, we've referred to you, we've described you, we've read about you as being a biker. What exactly does that mean? Do you ride with a motorcycle gang? Are you a part of a gang? What is?
I ride with bikers. I'm a biker. You know, what can I say? You know.
What's a typical day like for a biker? I mean, what
like
do you
a typical day for anybody. It depends on what you're talking about. If you're going on a run, you get up and you hurry up, or they'll leave you behind, and you jump on the back of a motorcycle and you get in the wind, you know, and then you go somewhere and you party down and you put up tents and you camp out, and sometimes you stay in motels. It's kind of like a constant vacation. Bikers are like gypsies. We travel a lot, especially when the weather's good, and sometimes even when it's not good. I mean, I rode for 6 hours in the rain in Washington and Oregon a couple of years ago. I rode in New Mexico with hailstones as big as that, you know.
But it's just basically on a whim. You decide to get together a party?
Sometimes. Some runs are planned. You know, all summer they have planned runs all over the country. This one here, the Sturgis, South Dakota Motorcycle Rally.
Put your hair back so we can put your hair back.
There you go.
That's the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in Sturgis, South Dakota. And they do that. That's the Black Hills Rally. They do that every year. And bikers come from all over the world.
Ah.
Not just all over the country. I've met people from Europe on that run. People come down from Canada. People come from everywhere.
And you just socialize. You party and have a good time. Do you have entertainment? I mean, is it that formalized, or just provide your own?
They have wet T-shirt contests and wet jockey short contests and motorcycle races and different, you know, skill runs, all kinds of things.
So there are activities. It's not just social.
Yeah. Depends on where you're going. You know, for a while I ran with a Clean and Sober Motorcycle Club.
Clean and Sober?
Yeah, that was a Clean and Sober Motorcycle Club, you know. And
does that mean exactly what it says?
It means exactly what it says, clean and sober, you know. And we still party a lot, and we do all the same crazy things, and, you know. As a matter of fact, the first time I went on a run with the Clean and Sober Club, I said, God, how can you have any fun if you don't get loaded? And you know what? I was high on the trip. It was great. I had such a good time. I never thought about getting loaded. I was loaded.
On yourself, huh?
Yeah, well, you see, I'm a natural speed freak. I get pumped up on my own adrenaline, you know. So I used to smoke a lot of pot to mellow me out. But now I take psychic development classes, and I've learned how to balance and ground myself, so I don't have to use pot. I can use my own breath and my own body chemistry.
We've heard a lot, obviously, about your son, Rocky. You have another son, Joshua,
yeah.
who we're going to meet right after this.
Great.
Stay tuned.
The Berkeley Bay Area Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority invites you to attend a social action luncheon, Political Power, Charting a Course for Action, with the dynamic Honorable Walter E. Fauntroy, U.S. Congressman of Washington, D.C., as guest speaker. The luncheon will be held Saturday, May 11th, 1985, at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in the Emmeline Jewett Ballroom, 11th and Broadway Street, Oakland, California. The no-host cocktail begins at 12:30, and lunch will be served at 1:30. Donations of $30 per person will benefit our scholarship fund. For more information, please call 529-2526.
That is not portrayed in the movie Mask is Rusty's first son and Rocky's brother, Joshua. Here to talk about his relationship with Rocky and how that relationship has given him a greater compassion and understanding for other people around him is Joshua Mason. Would you please welcome him? With the movie out and all your thoughts since the death of Rocky, what is your most vivid memory of your relationship with your brother?
Oh, I would say my most vivid memory is seeing him out on the street corner selling his toys.
Selling his toys?
Rocky was very money conscious and liked to have a lot of money, and instead of breaking his toys like I did when I was through with them, he would sell them.
So he was an enterprising young man.
Yes, he was.
So obviously,
a con artist.
A con artist.
Oh, yeah.
So he didn't have any problem dealing with people. In fact, he really kind of
He was
gravitated.
very extroverted, yeah.
Very outgoing. Did you, as a young boy growing up, having a younger brother who was, as we know, a perfectly normal young man, but who looked different, did that ever create any problems for you with your peers? Did you ever have to answer any questions about your brother?
Yeah, I think I had to answer a lot of questions, and I think I sort of was defensive about the whole thing. And so I would sort of go around looking for a fight about it, and was just very, very protective.
Now that you've obviously seen the movie, why weren't you portrayed in the movie? We did not know Rocky had a brother in Mask.
Well, I think that would be a question for the writer. I really don't know.
Do you know, Rusty?
Well, that was during a period of Rocky's life when Joshua wasn't around.
Joshua had left home?
Joshua had already left home.
But there was never an allusion to any other member in the family that might be a brother.
Listen, they were so busy cutting out scenes, if they'd had to have Joshua, they'd really been in trouble.
Velma, you had a question.
Yes. I'd like to know, what was Joshua?
Yes.
What was your reaction to your brother's death, and how did you deal with that?
Well, I think I really took his death pretty hard because I hadn't really been around the last 6 years of his life. And I guess a lot of times when people close to you die, you think about the things you didn't do. And so I really thought a lot about those. And it really took me a couple of years to really accept Rocky's death and to deal with it.
I understand you said at one time that you thought it was a real test for Rocky and you and your mom. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not so sure it was a big test for Rocky. He was like, it seemed like he was in control of everything. I think it was because of some of our attitudes. My mother was always very look conscious and you know, very critical of people who are overweight. And I think Rocky came along to sort of change some of those things and to help her see beyond that.
Do you concur with that, Rusty?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Although, you know, oddly enough, I learned to look for the beauty in everything. I saw beauty in Rocky all the time. I have pictures of him where I think he was really cute, you know. But other people agree with me, so, you know. Sometimes I think other people saw what I didn't, but I got really used to it.
How close were the two of you during all this?
Well, during the period depicted in the movie, we weren't really that close. You know, there was a whole gap in our lives. I left home when I was 17, and I never really fit into that scene. When I did live in the LA area, we weren't in that close of contact. So at that point, we weren't very close, but before that, we were very close, and now we're really good friends.
I couldn't have raised Rocky without Joshua's help. He was great. I mean, when the universe saw fit to put Rocky into my home, he also saw fit to put a brother for him into my home. That was, you know, exactly what we needed.
We asked Joshua how he reacted to Rocky's death. The scene in the movie is very touching. When you find Rocky, can you recreate that for us?
Well, it was really frustrating for me because, you know, year after year I hear that he was going to die, and it got to be like a challenge, and we'd beat them every time they say it. We'd come out on top, you know. And my first reaction was, why didn't we beat them? So it was very frustrating for me, and I was very angry. Once I calmed down and looked at the overall situation, this was exactly the way Rocky and I talked about his dying. He didn't want to be in a hospital. I'd already agreed that if there's a question of life support and I couldn't keep him out of it, I would pull the plug. So actually what he had done was died exactly what he said he wanted to. He wanted to die at home in his bed, and that's exactly where he died, exactly what he wanted to. But yeah, my first reaction was, you know, we should have beat them, because I was so used to beating them, you know, year after year. We proved the doctors wrong.
You talked to him a lot about dying, didn't you? Was he comfortable with that?
Yeah, well, we didn't talk a lot either. It was just an accepted thing, you know. Everybody's put here for some purpose, for some extent of time, depending on what path he chooses to walk along, you know. And Rocky was here to do something, and now that the movie's come out and I'm going through all these interviews and things, I see exactly why Rocky was here and exactly why he beat the doctors for so many years. What this movie has done for deformed people and the parents of these kids is fantastic. I was on a show in Philadelphia with Janet Sonnenberg. She wrote a book, Race to Live, a couple of years ago. Her little boy was burned over 85% of his body, and he's horribly deformed. And he's very much a spirited little boy, just like Rocky was. He gets out there, he goes to public school, he plays, he's, you know, very, very normal in his actions. And this boy probably has a harder time than Rocky. He's lost a hand, all his fingers, all his toes. He has to wear a helmet because his skull's been burned off. I mean, but these are the kind of things I never saw when Rocky was growing up, and now I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm working with a group of parents, parent support for special children. They've asked me to be on the board of directors. The woman who has this little boy started an organization in New York called MASK, Mothers Assistance to Scarred Kids, which I'm going to try to propagate on the West Coast. I think, that, you know, now I know why Rocky was here. I can see what his being here has done for the world. It's great.
Yeah. More of Rusty and Joshua Mason after this.
Call now for your free tickets. Our number is 4PIX.
Foothill College's 5th Annual Community Festival will be held Saturday, May 11th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. The free festival is for the entire family with carnival games, talent contests, arts and crafts, sports competitions, free swimming, international food, jazz, rock and classical music, and more. The festival is sponsored by the Associated Students of Foothill College as part of California Community College Week. Come to the Foothill College Community Festival on Saturday, May 11th, directly off Interstate 280 in Los Altos Hills. For more information, please call 960-4281.
Rusty and Joshua Mason with us this morning on People Are Talking. You know, we were talking about Rocky's deformity, but he also had some pain with this, and the pain got worse, did it not?
Yeah, about the last few weeks of his life, he got progressively weaker, and he started having headaches more often, and so we had to work harder with him.
How did you work with him?
Well, basically, Rocky always knew that he could make himself well. What we did was focus on positive things and take his mind off of the pain, you know, so that he could relax and deal with it. Some of it was done with breathing, some of it was done with psychic suggestion. I know it's probably, I understand, they consider it some form of hypnotherapy or natural biofeedback. I just think that Rocky was an adept at healing, and so he worked with these things. But basically, it was reminding him that he could do that, you know, take his mind off the pain and talk about happy incidences. You know, it's real easy to get trapped in a pain cycle if all you can think about is the pain. Once you can take your mind away from it and regulate your breathing and relax, a lot of the pain goes away as you relax anyway, any kind of pain.
Margie.
In the picture, there was a very touching scene with Rocky and his little blind girlfriend. Did he have a friend that was blind, or was that just added to the film?
No, he actually did have a girlfriend from the camp who was blind. Laura Dern, the girl who plays the blind girl, she and Eric hung around the camp for a while, to, you know, so Laura could learn to play blind. And one of the camp counselors told Laura that Rocky not only had a crush on a blind girl, she was blonde. And originally in the script, Anna wrote her as a dark-haired girl. And then Peter cast her as a blonde girl. So, you know, everybody who worked on this movie had some contact with Rocky on some level, you know. It seems like he dictated a lot of this. Anna's always felt that without Rocky dictating to her, she couldn't have wrote this.
But he did have a blind girlfriend.
Yeah.
And they did right after he came back from camp. And tried to communicate? Was that whole thing about him trying to communicate with her?
Probably so. You know, Rocky was 16 years old. He took a lot of his problems to his cousins or his brothers or to his stepfather rather than to me. You know, 16-year-olds get kind of secretive with their mothers. You know, I know Joshua left home when he was 17, but I don't think I knew anything about his actions from the time he was 14 on. And Rocky wasn't any different.
Rocky was about 11 when you left home, correct? Did you talk to him much after you had left home? Did he ever contact you or you contact him?
Basically, 2 or 3 times a year. You know, I'd call and talk to him on the phone and get over to visit when I could. And, you know, of course, when I came to San Francisco, the contact wasn't as often.
Sarah, you had a question.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to know, as you were growing up as a family, did you ever foresee that your life coming as a public notice such as it has, and now that it has, do you feel, you know, a sort of sense of accomplishment, and, you know, are you happy now that you're able to share and open up with people and show them how you believe and done everything that you have?
Yeah, none of this surprises me. I always had a feeling that the world would know about Rocky, that he was very special and that he had a lot to teach the world, and I'm really glad that it's come about, and I think that there are a lot of good things yet to come from it.
Joan, you had a comment.
Yes. Rusty, it's so hard when a parent is first making that adjustment to having a special child, and most parents are very isolated and very alone. Where did you get your support and your strength during that beginning time?
Well, I've never been much of an isolationist, and I've never spent a lot of time alone. I got most of my support from the bikers who were in and out of the house most of the time. And I always had people coming and going in my life. You know, when you live the kind of life I live, you know, even when you don't have bikers around, you always have somebody around. And I don't like to see people out there in the street with no place to go or nothing to eat, you know. So generally, there were always people around me. Plus, I had a family that was really great. I mean, just great, you know, and they treated Rocky like he was normal also, you know. It was no big deal.
We understand you're going to the Cannes Film Festival. And also,
yeah, I leave Monday.
Monday? And Peter Bogdanovich has offered you an acting role?
Yeah, I'm going to have a minor part in his next movie.
That's nice. And Joshua, you're an aspiring writer here in San Francisco?
Well, if for some reason you haven't seen Mask, go see it. It is a wonderful film. Thank you to both of you for being with us this morning. We'll be back.
7-8-8888.
I'm Elsa Clanch reporting on the design.